Good Tuesday to you, everybody in Gov 603. Welcome to week boom 2. How's everybody doing? Let's get this video started quickly with the last of today's coffee. Much better. How's everyone doing? Okay. How did week 1 pass? You're doing okay? So let's, this week, this video, we're going to talk about what you're doing now in week 2, and I have a couple of things I need you to pay attention to. Very quickly, back from week 1. All right. You took the participation quiz. Everybody got through that. And remember, first of all, I don't write it. Secondly, some of you said, hey, the questions don't seem to match the syllabus, et cetera, et cetera. It's just to determine that you're not a bot and you're actually somebody who's here. Okay. And you might say, well, that's dragging me through a pointless exercise, and I may not disagree with you, but it's something that we are required to do. All right. So now that you have that out of the way, you had a couple of readings, and I gave you the PDFs for them. That is, chapters 1 and 2 from the Johnson text, which you don't need to buy. Johnson, Reynolds, and Mykoff. It's a very interesting work, but it's hard to find and it's expensive. So I've, said, okay, if you want it, go get it. If you don't want it, don't worry about it. All right. And then you had some discussion questions. All right. So again, for this week, we're going to stay in that same text. Okay. And I want you to read chapters 3 and 4. And I've also provided you with a PDF for both of those, so you don't have to go search for anything. Okay, so last week, this part of the class. This is sort of the foundational period when we're asking things like, what are the assumptions of the empirical research process? Now, I need you to pay attention to the answers to these questions, because the answers to these questions will form the core material for what lands on the midterm and the final exam. So if you're wanting to know how to study for those, that's how you do it. Okay. So, be able to define these foundational terms like recreational research, empirical research, implied research. Be able to, if you're asked to write, say, a short answer to discuss what is empirical research, what are the characteristics of say, empirical research. Okay. Be able to identify basic graphs, know the difference between a line graph and a bar graph and a scatter plot graph. I'm not spending a whole lot of time on this by way of lecture and discussion because it's fundamental. All right. So make sure that you have that stuff down cold. For this week, we're going to continue with the same sort of process, that is foundational process. I'm going to ask you what's meant by research design. Be able to answer that, but both in terms of you could pick out the best answer, or you could write a short essay. Why is it hard for researchers to see their blind spot? And this goes for everybody, including us. Why can that be problematic? And often is problematic. In fact, within the social sciences, which political science fits into, there's what's called a replication crisis. And what that means is that people have been going back and looking at the studies that political scientists and sociologists and psychologists and communication scholars have been doing and trying to replicate the results, and they have not been able to in an alarmingly high percentage of the research that they're retesting. The upper end is around 70%. Part of what is suspected is going on is there is research blindness and what's called confirmation bias. That is, people tend to see what it is that they are looking for, and they tend to look for only what they want to see. If that sounds a little circular, that's exactly the point. All right. So watch out for that in your own work. Be able to formulate an hypothesis. You can say a hypothesis or an hypothesis. And let me put it to you this way. There are 3 elements to a hypothesis. Okay. First and foremost, A hypothesis involves two or more variables. Secondly, an hypothesis makes a prediction about a causal relationship. I'll come back to that word in just a second. A causal relationship between those two variables. And a variable is an event, it's a person, a variable is anything. Okay, so it makes a prediction about a causal relationship. And then number three, it makes the prediction has a direction. Now, let me give you an example that explains that. All right. In addition to being your research methods instructor and a member of the communications department and on the faculty in the School of Government, I spend a goodly amount of time backpacking. I love being out in the deep wilderness. I write about it. I think about it. In fact, I probably get most excited when I've got a new piece of gear getting ready to arrive. Maybe I should start a backpacking channel here. I don't know, maybe not. But anyway, and so a couple times a year I go on long trips. Typically for me now, long means say 50 miles or more. Like this summer, I did a 70-mile trip, and then I came back and I did a little shorter one in the mountains of Colorado. Last year, we did a 50-mile trip. The year before that, we did 110. Okay, so a couple of times, or once or twice a year, I'll do a long trip in order to stay, in good physical condition and sort of keep my mind focused on these long trips and frankly, keep my sanity. I do a lot of shorter trips. I'm probably out on trail, at least 2 or 3 times a month. The exception is right now, because the part of country that I live in, it's like 98 to 100 degrees, ambient temperature. And then when you add in sort of heat factors like humidity and stuff, it feels like it's 105. And no, I ain't going out on the trail. But when the heat breaks and the ticks go down, I'm back on the trail. And I live in a part of the country in which, we have a winter and it snows. The temperatures can drop and get very cold down into the negative temperatures, but the snow is not terribly deep. So I actually do a lot of hiking, short hiking. Short for me is anywhere from 5 to 20 miles in the wintertime. Okay. In between the periods of snow, it rains a lot in the wintertime where I live. So we'll have snow, then it'll rain and turn to slush, then it will freeze again, then it'll be snow, and this kind of cycle of, precipitation and thaw, precipitation and thaw. Let's say that I wanted to study the relationship between whether or not I wipe my muddy boots when I walk back into my house after hiking out on a trail, say on any given Saturday during the wintertime, and my wife's mood at the end of Sunday night. So I would construct a hypothesis first before I did the research. My hypothesis would go something like this. The frequency of my boot wiping, that's the first variable, is positively correlated to the frequency of my wife's bad mood. That's the second variable. In other words, I'm saying the less I wipe my boots, that is, have mud on my boots, the more frequently my wife will be in a bad mood by Sunday night. So the less I wipe my boots on Saturday afternoon, the greater her bad mood on Sunday night. So there are my two variables. All righty. And then I'm saying there is a causal relationship, meaning less boot wiping causes more bad mood. Okay. And we're gonna talk about in this class the difference between correlation and causation, and it's extremely important for you to remember the difference. But that's causal. This thing actually causes that. That's the second element. And then it has a direction. I'm looking at the relationship, the causal relationship between not wiping my boots and my increase in my wife's bad mood, not the increase in my wife's bad mood and not wiping my boots. Because let's say I was a jerk, which I'm not, but let's just suppose. And when my wife got upset with me, it's like, oh, what, you're going hiking again? I thought you were going to shovel the driveway or whatever, task I'm supposed to be doing. instead of out on a trail. And she's in a bad mood with me, and I think to myself, oh well, get upset with me. I'll show you. And when I come back to the house, I intentionally don't wipe my boots, and I track mud all over the carpet in the living room. Right? That would be looking at the relationship in the other direction. Bad mood causing no boot wiping. I mean, if I were a jerk, which I'm not, but we're not interested in that. We're interested in the relationship between no boot wiping and bad mood. Those are the three elements of a hypothesis. At least two variables, a causal prediction between the two variables, and a prediction direction between the two variables. Okay. So if you remember that, then it'll be easy for you to identify and create a hypothesis. And in fact, creating a hypothesis can be extremely helpful for you when you're getting ready to do a research project. Okay. And then finally, the question, from last week, that is, you were asked to be able to again, either just identify in matching or write a little bit. That is, what are the assumptions behind the empirical research process of the assumptions, which is most likely to invalidate research results, right? And I typically don't go over your answers in this video. The next video that I make, and I'll post it later this week, I will review your answers from last week. All right, and I'll read some, and the ones that got it right, we'll read those. And I'm not going to read ones that got it wrong. So if you hear an answer, if you hear me saying, this is what we're looking for this question, and you did something else, change your stuff. Okay, for this week 2, we got two things going on. Number one, you're going to continue studying these foundational concepts, theory and hypothesis and causal relationships. And then number two, perhaps even more importantly, you're going to start thinking about your semester research design paper. Now, in the module for week 2, under assignments, like week 2 assignments description, I think it is, you're going to find the instructional sheet for the paper. All right. I hope it's pretty straightforward, but let me go over it with you very quickly. What you're going to write in this project is what's called in this class is called a research design project. Now, a research design project is different from an actual research project in that in the design project, you're proposing the research. Think of it like this. Imagine that you wanted to get a big bag of money to do some research. You wanted to get research money. So you were going to describe to those who had the money, the funders, what your project focuses on, why anybody should care. I mean, that's the gift of academics. You get to choose to study anything you darn well please, but that along with the gift comes the obligation. It had better be of sufficient interest, and you should explain it in a sufficiently interesting way that anybody else is going to give a darn. All right, that burdens on you. So you should be able to explain what it is, why anybody should give a darn, how you're going to go about gathering the data, what method you are going to use to analyze the data, what hypotheses you're going to test, like say the boot wiping hypothesis. Okay, I could say, okay, I want money to test the relationship between boot wiping and cranky wives, and this is important to husbands all around the world, or boyfriends, or whatever. Okay, and then you're going to talk about what might cause some problems in terms of shortcomings. In that kind of study, one of the problems might be, well, some wives put up with more than others, and so although they might be bothered, some of them are more expressive and less expressive. So it's going to be hard to tell if they're in a bad mood, because that's self-reporting. Okay, that's just an example. All right, that's a research design project. You will not have to do the research. So I want to make that very clear. This seems to be one of the confusions that comes up with this paper. It's like, oh, wait a minute. I've got to go out and create this survey and research people. No. All right. Now, I prefer to do my papers, that is the papers for my classes, in 2 parts. All right. And here's the reason why. You hear this all the time, or you should if you haven't. And I heard this as an undergraduate, it was just like pounded into my head with a mallet. Writing is rewriting. Writing is rewriting, meaning learning how to write and writing well means rewriting what you wrote. Okay, fine. If that's the case, all right, then why is it that most classes are set up that you do a paper, you turn it in on the last week, maybe 2 or 3 days before the end of class, okay? And then your professor has to go through all of your papers and provide something that resembles meaningful feedback. And then you are going to take that meaningful feedback and most studiously study it and go, oh yeah, okay, I'll get right on that and fix that. I don't know about you, but when I was a student, both undergraduate and graduate, I had so much going on between work and life and getting ready for the next semester. I would get my papers back and I'd kind of go, and maybe in the aggregate that is all collected together, I would glean some advice from my instructors. But as far as my research and my writing, no. All right, it was very slow. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to split this paper into 2 parts. You're going to turn it in on 2 different deadlines. And the first bit, which will be due September 24th, so a little less than a month from now, I'm going to give you a lot of feedback. I'll turn it around to you pretty quickly. And I'm going to give you a lot of feedback about your writing, about your research, proposed research style, about whether it's a hypothesis or a research question. We'll talk about those. That's clear, whether this project is actually doable. And now, let me caution you, that's the one limiter that I'm going to put on you. You get to pick whatever issue you want to research, but it has to be realistic. If you tell me you're going to count, you're going to do a project that researches how many magical unicorns dance around, in a fairy circle. Okay. No, I don't know why I'm thinking that, but anyway, you get my point. Okay. And I'm going to give you a lot of feedback and then I'm going to give you a grade for part 1. And then the part 2 final bit, which will include part 1. So it's not 2 papers. It's just 2 parts of 1 paper. You're going to take the input from me and you're going to do more of what I say. This is, do this, and you're going to stop doing what I say. Hey, don't do that. And you're not going to do it in the second part. And then you're going to turn the whole paper in. Now, since writing is rewriting, here's how I arrange these exercises. If you get a score on part 1 of the paper, all right, then your score goes up after part 2. I will change the score on part 1 to match the score on part 2. Only if it goes up. If it goes down, I leave it alone. So let's just say that you get a 75 on part 1, and after you stop clutching your chest to get your heart to stop. When you make your revisions and you follow through with what I tell you on part 2, you get a 95. I'll change that 75 to a 95. Do you understand? All right. Now, last point, and this is laid out in the sheet. This is not a draft exercise. I don't want drafts. Okay. I don't want drafts are for you. I'm not saying there's something wrong with drafts. I use them all the time. Don't turn them in. Drafts are like doodles. I don't want to see your doodles. All right. We're not here to evaluate how well you doodle. We're here to evaluate how well you can design, research, and write. And I don't mean that in a mean way. That's just university, man. All right. So no draft work. Okay. So look at that sheet. It'll tell you what you need to have in part 1. Or, we can call it, I think I call it stage 1. Okay. But I mean part 1. All right. And then that's due September 24th. And then what you'll need to have for part 2, which is due in December. Okay, everybody. All right. So a little bit later this week, I'll go over the answers from last week. And so to let you know, who's in the neighborhood, in terms of what we're looking for by way of answers to the questions. So for this week, get into the module, have a look at the 2 chapters, and it's one document, by the way. If you go in there, go, oh, I only see one. I've made photographs and then turned them into PDFs. So it's chapter 3 that runs into chapter 4. Okay, so and tear them up. All right, everybody, have a great week. Okay. Oh, sorry. And when you think of a paper topic in week 2 in the discussion, there's a post line for you to put your paper topic. I want you to put it in there. And class, I want you to be reading each other's paper topics and give some meaningful feedback, not like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. It's like, okay, why is it a great idea? All right, what makes it sound like a fantastic research design project? Be helpful to one another. All right. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for your attention. Have a wonderful week. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on Canvas. Bye-bye.